Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome everyone to Angie Thrive, which serves to hold space for Muslim divorced women. Today I've got Iman Boundaoui joining us. Iman is a somatic practitioner. We have had Iman before with us, and we're very lucky to have her again. She's a somatic practitioner and facilitator with a deep commitment to working with individuals and communities to heal and transform collective, intergenerational, and politicized trauma. Iman also has practiced as an attorney and has practiced as a civil litigator, including civil rights and immigrant rights advocacy. Assalamu alaikum, Iman. Welcome. Marhaban.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us once again. So what brings us today together for this discussion is because, as we all know, of the atrocities that are happening in Gaza, and how the Palestinians are pretty much being massacred, and the blatant fabrications from the media. And it's absolutely maddening to all of us who have this collective consciousness. And we're just seeing many of us in our communities where we don't really know how to navigate this pain. There's a lot of grief and sadness about what's happening, and a lot of anger, rage when you see what's happening in the media and the distortions, and that frustration of not being able to do anything about it. We feel like our hands are tied. And I've just spoken to a friend this morning, and she told me that she's been crying every day. Today she cried about 4 times. So I guess my question is that how do we address this in terms of dealing with this pain of feeling another part of our body that's aching? It's so wounded. And as you know from the hadith, like, we are a collective body, this ummah. And so if you have anything to say about that as a start.
I'm just feeling that, letting it land in my body. Because what I want to say about this can feel counterintuitive and can feel against our first reactive impulses. Okay, so here's what I want to say. We are experiencing a range of really powerful emotions right now, like you said. We're experiencing rage, we're experiencing anger, grief, sadness, really, really, really big emotions that maybe we have never had to contend with. And what's interesting about these emotions is that when we have a big moment emerge, like the one that we're in now, what it does is it pulls forward with it historical grief that has been untended to. Deaths in our families that we never fully grieved get pulled forward with this grief. Anger and rage that we have experienced in our lives because of microaggressions and oppressions that we have experienced as immigrants living in the West, as Muslim women living in societies where there's an extreme amount of Islamophobia. All of that rage and anger gets pulled forward. So we're not only experiencing the rage and the fear and the grief of this moment, it is pulling historical threads forward with it. And that is creating a magnitude that feels like we can't hold it and handle it. And one of the most important things we can do in this moment is expand our capacity to hold all of these feelings, is to increase, we call it in somatics and trauma healing work, widening the window. Most of us have been living this world with a very narrow window of what we can handle, a narrow window of the amount of joy we can handle. And if it gets too big, it's like, I can't be with that. A narrow window of the amount of grief that we can handle. And outside of that window, we pop out of ourselves, we dissociate, we leave, we find a way to avoid the grief. A narrow window of the amount of anger and rage that we can handle. So these are the lives we've been leading, a very narrow window for our emotions. Unfortunately, because our schooling systems, our educational systems, our upbringings don't necessarily nourish inside of us a capacity to feel ourselves and to feel our emotions. We're often taught to tamp down our emotions, ignore them, override them, especially in Western cultures, especially in Western civilizations where the body doesn't mean anything and the emotions are irrelevant. Everything is about the intellect. Everything is about your capacity to rationalize it. So all of that together has left us with a very mild capacity to handle big feelings and big energy. Our work right now is to go from here to here to here. Keep widening the window of what we can hold. How do we do that? We need to cultivate practices of stillness, meditation, breath, movement. We need to cultivate practices in our daily life that basically these practices, what they all have in common, whether it's a meditation practice or qigong or yoga, it is about being with yourself, being inside your own skin, feeling your breath move from head to toe, being inside of your aliveness. When we are inside of our aliveness and the life of our body, when something like rage and fear and grief emerges, we can feel it before it gets really big. In fact, we can feel it when it's just a baby, the baby form of grief, and then we feel it grow and grow, and we grow with it. We grow our capacity to hold it just like a crying baby. A baby doesn't go from 0 to 100 screaming and wailing. It starts out fussy, and you're like, oh, there's something's happening with the baby. The baby's fussy. You try to soothe the baby, and then maybe the baby increases in the fussiness, and then eventually you get to crying and wailing. We have to treat ourselves the same way. We have to be present enough to notice when the grief begins to form, not when it's wailing and screaming, and all of a sudden we have no idea why we're crying and losing it and screaming. We have to be there with ourselves, like a baby, holding ourselves and noticing, oh, something is starting to wiggle inside of me. Something is starting to fuss inside of me. Maybe it's a baby um, feeling an emotion of grief or sadness that's starting to grow. So we begin to soothe ourselves at the baby stages of our grief. We don't wait till the grief is screaming and wailing, because as we know, as many of your viewers and your audience will know, as mothers, once a baby is screaming and wailing, that the amount of energy it takes to soothe that child is an incredible amount of energy. It takes a lot of attention and care to soothe a screaming baby. It takes a lot less energy to soothe a fussy baby. We have to be present with ourselves enough to know when the grief inside of us is starting to fuss, when the fear inside of us is starting to wiggle and grow, before it's screaming and wailing, and then all of a sudden we have no idea how to soothe ourselves. Yeah. So stillness practices like meditation, like salah, if we're really present with our salah, it can be a stillness practice. Unfortunately, many of us pray in a way that is formulaic and just moving through the postures and getting it done like a checklist, but we're not present. But if we get present in our prayer, if we get present with 10 minutes of meditation every morning, if we can get present on our morning walk, the morning walk is not about just moving the legs and pumping the blood. The morning walk should be an internal practice. Try to internalize everything that you're doing instead of just having it being external. And through that practice of internalizing, of feeling ourselves, we get more sensitive. We get more sensitive to when an emotion is rising before it is at 100. We can notice it when it's at 5%. We can notice it when it's at 10%, and we can begin to get present with soothing ourselves, putting a hand to the heart, reading some Quran, making some dhikr, making some dua, whatever your medicine is. There's so much medicine out there to help our ailing hearts, but we have to cultivate intentional practices that get us more sensitive and sensitized to what is happening inside, so we can meet ourselves where we are. Meet yourself at 10% of sadness instead of waiting for 70% of sadness. Meet yourself at 5% of grief instead of 100%. And see, just notice how you are capable of soothing yourself, finding some solace, realizing and recognizing all of this is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands. Don't wait to get to the moment of despair when you feel like we have no control and we don't know what's happening and we can't do anything. Meet yourself at 10% of despair, where you can actually intervene and remind yourself of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran over and over and over again. We will test you with fear and loss of property and loss of family and children. We will test you with loss of wealth, but do not fear. Have patience. We can have patience at 10%, 15%, 20%. It's much harder at these higher levels. So I want us as a community, I want to help us get to a place where we have more rigor, where we are approaching our lives with more rigor, where we say, I will never miss this meditation practice. Every single salah is a moment for me to meditate, that we have to approach our lives in these more rigorous ways as a preparation for these difficult moments and as a remedy for these really difficult.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. My first question is that now for the person who hasn't caught themselves at 10% and they now are at the point of pretty much hysteria, of complete overwhelm, panic attack kind of a thing, what can a person do in that state?
There are many different emergency trauma relief techniques that people can learn and use at these moments. I can share one of them here. So a very basic emergency relief technique that we use is something called hands breathing, or breathing with the hands. So it's essentially matching the movement of the hands with your breath like an accordion, and using your hands like a conductor to slow your breath down. So just bring your hands to face each other. And on your next inhale, expand. So right now we're just matching the breath. So the hands are not leading, the breath is. Wherever your breath is, just match your hands.
And when I do this, maybe it's because of a qigong practice I usually do, I just feel the biomagnetism between the hands.
Exactly.
It's strong.
It's very powerful.
And I've met people who say they can't feel anything, but the more that you do it and you focus, you can absolutely feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now, with the next 3 breaths, your hands become the conductor. Elongate your hands, and as you elongate your inhale. So your hands are conducting. You're using your hands to elongate your breath 2 more. So that is a really effective technique that we use to help people get out of stress, fight, flight, freeze, and back into rest. Mm-hmm. And again, this is something that you can employ in real time. Another thing that is like part of our sunnah is you can make wudu when you are in distress or in hysteria and you feel like there's no remedy. Just trust that the practices we have work. Even if your mind doesn't believe that anything will work, let your body go towards it. Somatics teaches us over and over and over again, let the body lead. Let the body lead. So in a moment like that, your mind will be sending you messages that say, nothing is going to help. It's complete despair. There's no hope. Okay, your mind is saying that. Come into your body for just a moment and let your body do something differently. Make wudu, splash water on your face, and just notice how doing an embodied practice can shift you. Even if you haven't intentionally shifted your thoughts, the practice will shift your thoughts for you. Your body, soothing your body, will shift the narrative for you. You don't have to try to shift the narrative directly. All you have to do is shift what you're doing. So breathing, making wudu, offering 2 rak'ahs of prayer. If you're standing, sit. If you're sitting, lay. Close your eyes. Any embodied practice that is intentional, putting intention with practice together, will be highly effective. So that would be my advice in a moment of dysregulation.
When it comes to prayer, any tips for how a person can establish that kind of hudur, presence and khushu, and basically using al-salah in a way as it was supposed to be used?
Absolutely. I will tell you what I do with my prayer, and it works. Alhamdulillah, it's been working for me. Before I pray, I stand for at least 3 minutes. I do not enter the prayer any sooner than at least 3 minutes of standing. And in that 3 minutes of standing, I center myself. And I use a centering practice that comes from my somatic lineage. So we can do this together. Just standing, fully attention. The external world no longer matters in this moment. Whatever is happening outside stays outside. We pull our attention into the life of our body. And from that place, we center in 3 dimensions, our length, our width, and our depth. So let's center in our length. Let yourself settle down into gravity. Give more of your weight to the seat. When you're standing, before you're standing for prayer, give more of your weight to your feet. Let more of yourself down. Let the muscles fall onto your bones. Let your bones settle into gravity. And then in the upper half of your body, find your length. Allow space between the vertebra of your spine, like you're lengthening and extending your spine all the way through the crown of your head to heaven, to the sky. So you're balanced up and down. You're tethered to earth, you're anchored to earth, and you're tethered to heaven. Your length is your dignity. Remind yourself that you're standing before your creator and offering this prayer to your creator. So you want to stand with dignity. Without losing your length, start to find your width. Side to side of your body, expanding across your chest, expanding across your belly, your hips. taking up space, getting wide in your sense of purpose. Width is the place of connection, so we can feel connected here to the angels on our right side and the angels on our left. We can connect here to the metaphysical world and feel that felt sense of unity with all of creation here. So now we have length, dignity, width, connection. Let's center in our depth. We have a back. Feel, lean back into your back body. Back of your head, back of your shoulders, back of your hips, back of your thighs. Our back body holds our ancestry. All of our ancestors, our histories are here at the back. Remember who's come before you. What have they taught you? What have you learned? What wisdom is back here? Feel your insides, this dark part of your body, all of your organs you cannot see, but you can feel. You can feel your heart space. You can feel your guts from the inside. Make more room with your breath, with your depth. Come into your front body, this forward-facing part of you, facing into this prayer that you're about to offer. Facing into your future. What future do you desire? What are you longing for? What are you committed to? Length, width, depth, and purpose. Center. What's the purpose of this? And then from there, from that place, a prayer that begins can be more mindful, slower, more settled, more connected. All of the things that we hope for when we say khushu', all of that is khushu', right? Connectedness, purpose, center, intentionality, slowness, sincerity. And we can cultivate all of that before we begin. And that's the practice that I use.
Okay, thank you. Now I've got other questions regarding I've come across recently people who would say, oh, I'm going through this, or, I've just gotten divorced, or I still have some anxiety about this, but, oh, I shouldn't be talking about it because it's really lame that I'm talking about this given what's happening to the Palestinians. And so I see that there's this almost undermining of people's pain. And I don't think that it solves a problem because they're just suppressing what is not going to just disappear, but they don't know how to handle that with this enormity of, this atrocity that's happening right now.
Yes, we have a lot of survivor guilt in our communities. And, this isn't the first time I've seen it come up. I think we have a lot of this in our community outside of the situation, that there's constantly a comparison to, what is worse, like, oh, other people have it worse, so I shouldn't complain. And I believe there is a beautiful spiritual root to that, is that it constantly grounds us in a sense of gratitude, constantly giving us perspective on other people's oppression. So there is a beautiful aspect to it, which is there's a lot of empathy that is built in and comes as part of our religious and spiritual practice. A lot of empathy, gratitude, perspective. At the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and we know that the tests that we are given are particular to us and are meant for us. So when we deny the magnitude of what it is we are experiencing in our lives, because we look at what other people are experiencing and we feel shame and guilt for feeling bad about what's happening in our life, what we're doing consequentially, and maybe not so consciously, is we're also overriding the reality that those things in our life is what God gave us for our growth and our transformation and our coming closer to God. That by denying the gravity of what is happening in our lives, we're also skipping over what God has given us, specifically designed for our unique circumstances to test us and to help us grow. So when we skip over our pain and our hurt, we're also skipping over our growth and our transformation. We're doing both in the same time. And we're looking at other people's pain. We're looking at other people's, but that's not our life. We can't skip over what God has given us in our life to test us.
It's kind of
We
counterproductive because we can't intervene and actually do anything in a
no,
tangible way over there. Yet we are also paralyzed, can't address what's happening in our own lives and using that as a means of expansion, growth. And you're kind of like, it's almost like just being frozen. Yeah.
exactly, exactly, exactly. And it is counterproductive because our our healing and our growth and our transformation is directly linked to the liberation of Palestine. If we believe we are one body, I cannot ignore the finger that is rotting and going to be amputated because I say there's something else in another part of the body. No, we have to tend to our part so that the whole can be healed and liberated. If we ignore our part, then subhanAllah, that might be the downfall. While the rest of the body is taking care of itself, people in Gaza are taking care of what is happening there. If you watch their videos, they are so incredibly resilient. They are so grounded in their faith and their surrender and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to match that courage. We have to use them as an inspiration for our own lives. Where are the places in our life where we've gotten lazy, where we have given up, where we have said, oh, that's not a big deal? Where are the places that we have to tend to so that we are as resilient as they are, as courageous as they are? Let us match their courage instead of falling into despair, because they are not falling into despair. If we fall into despair, that's the shame. That's the shame, because we have an incredible amount of privilege and comfort. We have so much privilege and comfort, so much privilege and comfort. We have no right to fall into despair. We have no right to fall into despair. We have to look at them and realize if they are experiencing what they are experiencing and they're surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they're waking up every day and they're moving with an incredible amount of courage and rigor, we have to be doing the same here in our lives. Let us not fall into shaitan's trap of despair. That is Satan's trap, right? All of the fear mongering in the media, that is a manifestation of shaitan's trap. All of the messages we're getting of giving up, no, resist that, fight that. That is our battle. And we have to be prepared for that. We have to condition our lives, condition our bodies so that we resist despair and resist fear and constantly have practices that we can fall back into that heal us in real time so that each day we come out stronger. Each year we're coming out stronger. Every single moment of our lives should be strengthening us. So we have to be rigorous in our practices. We have to be rigorous.
100%. That's really hit the spot. Do you have anything to say about this aspect of many people feeling guilty about doing something that brings them joy in this time? If they no, we should cancel this gathering or do this because it almost seems inappropriate for us to be mirthful at a time of such trauma. Wrong. Need to be happy right now.
You know, my mom shared a story with me once that during the Algerian Revolution and the war for Algerian independence from French colonization, She was like, do you think people stopped getting married? She was like, we were in the middle of war and people were celebrating marriage in beautiful ways. And that was part of their liberatory practice. They're like, we refuse for them to take our joy away from us. We refuse for them to take life away from us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us these beautiful lives, and we are intended to nurture those lives with joy, with love, with connection. These are part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's characteristics. These are part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's aspects. When we look and read at the names of God, we see joy and beauty and love all throughout them. We should never stop practicing those aspects. We should never stop practicing those divine names. That is part of the liberatory practice, is to say, Wallahi, subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is all of this pain, and also, we have to be expansive enough to hold the joy inside of it. It's part of our resilience. It's part of what keeps us hopeful in life. If we canceled all of our joy and canceled all, um, practices of pleasure in our life, what would that leave us with? Darkness. That would leave us with despair. Again, we would fall back into despair. Use the beautiful moments of connection in your community as a resilience practice. You don't have to forget what's happening in Palestine. It is not a forgetfulness. Remember them in your joy. Remember them in your gatherings. Remember them in your celebrations. Hope for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them moments of joy. Hope for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them moments of celebration. I promise you they will not stop celebrating. I promise you when the babies are born, women will be in the room ululating and celebrating and reading Surah Al-Fatiha. So if they don't stop, we don't stop. Yeah. We have to be resilient, and gathering and celebrating and sharing joy and love is resilience. It gives us hope. It feeds and nourishes the seed of hope inside of us. And we should never let that part and aspect go.
Iman, it was immensely inspiring. We encourage our viewers to continue to strengthen themselves as a community, to help in whichever way you can, whether it's giving sadaqah, whether it's taking political action, whether it's waking up with tahajjud, qiyam al-layl every night, in majalis of dhikr, and we turn to Allah that to strengthen ourselves, that we also have more capacity to help. And as Iman said, that the body is the whole, to take care of ourselves and our communities. And we just keep making dua for openings for the ummah.
Yes. Yes.
Anything else you'd like to add in closing, Iman?
No, just gratitude, grateful for this conversation, and may it serve, inshallah, it serves the community.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.